you've been told about Jesus' invitation, that he loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life, that if you pray a certain prayer, you will go to heaven when you die, that if you commit to following him, you won't have any more problems in your life. I don't know what you've been told, but if you're like most, it was abbreviated or completely misrepresented. The real invitation is aggressive, it's bold, and it takes a healthy dose of God's power coupled with human effort. But it's also for now, not later. Character transformation, not behaviour modification. Jesus invites you to attune your character to his, to possess a heart and life like his. Nobody is saying you can earn it. It'll take God's grace. Nobody is saying it'll be easy. It'll take hard work. But what if you really could attune your character to his, and in doing so, discover a whole new way of being human? If your life feels unmanageable, Jesus thinks he can help.
So I talked to Kate. Kate is the Australian voice that you hear on that, who will be leading our music and arts here real soon, we think. I talked to her 2 weeks ago. Check this out. So I might have been making fun of her in that phone call for the way in which she broke her knuckle, because she broke her knuckle in her right hand, because she swung at a tennis ball and missed the tennis ball and hit herself in the knee and bruised her knee and broke her finger. So I'm sitting there having this iChat conversation with Kate, might have been making fun of her for the way she broke her knuckle. And I kid you not, when I stood up from that meeting, this is why I have bad theology that sometimes involves superstition. When I stood up from that meeting, I was greeted with a stress fracture in my foot. I'm not kidding. Like, stand up from that meeting, walk through the room and go, ouch, that hurts, and time tells later that my foot is broken. So don't make fun of Australians who might have broke their hand playing handball with their tennis ball. It just doesn't work out well for you, and it further avails itself to my poor theology at times in terms of like, God's going to zap me. So sometimes there are topics that I get to bring to the table that I feel like I get to bring from a position of strength, from a place in my own life where God and his grace and my family and all the things that combine to helping us be well in certain areas. There's sometimes I get to talk about things where I feel like it comes from a place of strength. Not today. Not at all, actually. The subject that we're going to talk about this morning has been this very stark reminder to me that the journey towards transformed character is arduous, that it's long, that it's captivating, but that it's also thorough, and in some ways that it would just be a whole lot easier to adapt a worldview that says Jesus just cares about what we think. Like, it's been a reminder to me that if you set out to say, Jesus, I don't want to just go to heaven, though that would be nice too. Jesus, I don't just want to believe in some otherwise arbitrary ideas, but Lord, I want you to change who I am as a husband and as a leader and as a parent or as an employee. Like that's you're kind of vulnerable because it invites him to kind of mess with your weakness. And that's been very true for me this week. And yet, on the other hand, I've also been reminded this week that Jesus' understanding of the human condition, like of what ails us and what wrecks us and what causes us to hurt the people we love the most and what causes us to hurt ourselves the most, like it's been a reminder to me of just how attuned he is to the human condition. And in all honesty, it's been a reminder to me that, like, if you're a guest with us this morning, or if you're someone here and you don't even follow Jesus, I think any self-defense mechanisms you have up, you can just put them away, because to me, the brilliant thing about Jesus is how profoundly practical he is. And he's so helpful that even if you're not willing to go there with regards to his divinity, like I just invite you to table that this morning. Like I think it's important. Obviously, we're a church, but you can table that, because the degree to which he can just speak to the stuff you're dealing with, to me, is so graceful of him. And in fact, maybe your story will be like the original followers of his story, who had to spend years with him before, like, the fact that he was God really became the pressing issue. But they just found him to be so darn helpful. This morning, well, I was reminded, let me just kind of go this way. I did a memorial service 2 weeks ago, incidentally, the same day that I sat down and made fun of Kate and broke my foot. And it was of a friend. I was leading this memorial service for a friend's mom. Now, she was 89 years old, so all funerals, all memorial services are sad, but as far as that goes, this was about as good as it gets, right? Because 89 years old, it was a celebration of life. And I'd been briefed beforehand that her older sister was also still alive. She was 92, I believe. And of course, at 92, was having some cognitive issues. And so I stepped up to the lectern. And it was a room that I'd never been in. There was a lectern, that I don't experience very often, this podium thing with a built-in microphone, and it was the Tuesday after Ale, so it was a really busy weekend, so I didn't have time to memorize like I would try to, so I had an iPad in front of me, and I was trying to read from that, and I was in this room that I'd never been in, and I had to deal with this microphone, and I didn't think about that in advance, and there was a room full of people who didn't know me, and what makes it even more awkward is they pretty much knew I didn't know her all that well, and so it was just uncomfortable, and I got a sentence out of my mouth when this gal who was like there's no way she was 10 feet away from me. I got one sentence out, and she said, "Can't hear you." This was the sister. I had been briefed. I said, "Okay, well, I'll get a little closer to the microphone." So I said something else. "Still can't hear you." Oh, this is fantastic. So I look back to the sound guy, because at this point, like, I'm trying to be gracious, but in my head I'm going, you're 92 years old. Yeah, you can't hear me. That should be expected, I think. And so I looked back at the sound person to say, like, "Hey, turn me up, would you?" And yet it wasn't Tyler or Joe or any of the normal sound guys. I was hoping that, like, they would understand, like, yeah, we're just trying to, like, graciously appease her, but it's not the sound system. And so I look back at him, "Hey, turn it up, will you?" Another sentence, "Sure wish I could hear you." And it was, we kind of had this banter. Now, in some ways it was fun, because I was uncomfortable to begin with, and so, hey, this helps. And I sat down, and there was some music, and there was a poem, and there was some scripture reading, and as I was sitting there, she was still grumbling, like, "Man, I sure wish I could hear him. Like, I think I'm louder without a microphone." I stood back up, "Can't hear you." I mean, it was this, I told friends, it's the only time I've ever been heckled in my life, and it was at a memorial service. Let me ask you this. Why do we yell? You ever think about that? I mean, obviously, that can vary, and her situation is one answer to that question, but why do we raise our voice? Why do we use language the way that we do? What I want to meddle with this morning and challenge you on a little bit is the way in which you use language, and the way you use words, and the way you use ideas, and the way you use your assessment of people's decisions, and how exactly you leverage that. First, let me ask you this. How strong in you is the temptation to be controlling? How strong in you is the temptation to be controlling? Can we turn the house lights up just a little bit so I can see some faces? Because I want to make sure these guys aren't lying to me, because I know some of them. Just those lights, yeah. Yeah, a little more. Thank you. How strong in you is the temptation to be controlling? Shall we ask the one you're with? Or your kids? Or your parents? Or your siblings? Okay, let me just kind of, in case you're unclear on this, it's very strong in me. You don't need to ask my wife or my kids or the staff here at Narrate or my friends. It's very strong in me. I think it's a function of both my personality and my temperament. I heard someone recently explain those, and it was helpful to me that they said that many psychiatrists, they view your temperament is like the foundation of a house. It's like before you have a family, before you make any decisions, like your temperament is what's there. And your personality is the structure. It's the result of the decisions you make and the decisions that your parents make, and your background and your choices as an adult, all those different things. The temptation to be controlling is in both my temperament and in my personality. It's something that I'm well aware of that I can leverage for good or that I can leverage to be really gross. I'm pretty good at the latter. Let me get a little more specific. How strong in you is the temptation to be controlling with your words? Tone is one way. Volume, inflection, the very words that you say, the nature of why you're saying them, even your ideas. Like how tempted are you to use this thing called language to actually control people, to manage people, to parent, to be a spouse, to be a leader, to be an employee? This morning, what I want to challenge you to do is consider, I think in Matthew chapter 7, which is where we're going to be this morning in both the Divine Conspiracy and Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, I think what Jesus really challenges us to do is to begin to consider the way we use language and how we use language, and in particular, how we use language to get what we're looking for from people, how we use language to manage people. So let's just look at those first 7 verses or first 12 verses in Matthew chapter 7, and then I'm going to try to unpack them a little bit at a time. He says, do not judge. So this is probably a familiar chunk to many of you. Even if you're not a church person, like you like this verse, right? Like this is one of our favorite verses, like don't judge, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Now, if you're looking at a physical Bible, which is like 2 of you, which is okay, I wouldn't either because you got it on the screen. Most of your Bible, if you get home, there'll be a section divide there. I'm going to argue this morning that there shouldn't be because it continues, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for a bread, notice it's still centered on language here. We're still talking about the way we manage one another. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you're evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others what you'd have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. This is what good looks like, Jesus is saying. In the first 12 verses of Matthew, Jesus addresses the age-old human temptation to manage others, to control others with our blame, our condemnation, and even our wonderful solutions to our friends' problems. And what he begins to unpack is a completely different option, a much more loving, much more helpful way of walking with those that we love. Now, if you haven't been with us in this series, or if you have, by way of reminder, these are not new laws. We've been working through this series all the way from Easter, and part of what we've been seeing time and time and time again is what Jesus is doing is not offering new things to do. What he's doing is offering a reflection, an illustration of what it looks like when we step into the kingdom, how we can expect our relationships to look, how we can expect to treat people, who we can expect to be when we allow Jesus, when we allow ourselves to be Jesus' apprentice, something that we're going to finally dive into next week and a couple weeks after. Dallas Willard says this is an illustration of the inner texture of how disciples living in the kingdom will use language. They're not laws. He starts, well, let's just go back and look at those first 5 again. Go ahead, next slide. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you'll be judged, and with the measure you use, it'll be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck, let me take that speck out of your eye when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? Go ahead. You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eyes. Jesus is first and foremost saying, hey, let's step back from the temptation to manage others by use of blame and condemnation. And ultimately what he's going to say, there's a better way. Now, this passage is rich, of course, with content. This whole idea of judging and what constitutes judging and when is judging, and when is correction, and where's the line there. That all deserves a lot of attention, none of which are we going to do this morning. But the bottom line, if you were to kind of take the 30,000-foot view of this text, is Jesus is saying love does not blame. Love does not shame. Love does not condemn. Like, it's not the way of the kingdom. And if you're anything like me, the trouble is, well, then how do we manage people? Like, if you're anything like me, the trouble is, but it's got a good track record. Like, it really helps me parent. It really helps me lead. Like, I don't even know how I would parent if it were not for the opportunity to condemn and even blame. Seriously. You with me? I mean, it's really easy to say, like, this isn't helpful, but it kind of is helpful. We have these friends, bless their heart. Have you ever noticed that you say bless your heart, and then you can follow that with anything you want? It's like the Christian way of saying anything you want. But I mean that literally. Like, they're these very good friends of ours, and they're very good friends of our children as well, and they've made note of the fact that Costco muffins are not in the Hushka family grocery budget. Are they in yours? You know those things? Those like 10,000 calorie muffin things? So these friends of ours, bless their heart, the great thing about them is periodically when they go to Costco, they grab a package of these Costco muffins and they send them home with us. And for our kids, it's like Christmas. They have them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're gone in 30 seconds, and we make them eat them in the halves at a time, and they're always the poppy seed ones. But the problem is those muffins are made of what? Yeah, there's sugar in them too, but they are 100% contained in a wax wrapper. What? Crumbs. They're just pure crumbs. Like, that's all a Costco muffin is. It's a little bundle of crumbs. That's all it is. And our children they really struggle with the concept of the dinner plate. You have this problem? Like, and so Monday night, Teresa was working. And we had these muffins, and Chase, Dad, can I watch a muffin? Or can I eat a muffin? Yeah, you can eat a muffin. And so I walk into the dining room, and there it is. There's this demonstration of crumbs all over the kitchen table. Like, there's a waxy paper thing and crumbs, no evidence of a plate anywhere. And so I had one of those brilliant parenting moments with Chase, like, dude, seriously, you got to use a plate. And I'm trying not to allow the Hulk to come out. So I thought I did pretty good. Next morning, getting the kids ready for school, can't run. Teresa's late coming home from work, that's okay. Hear the front door swing close. I think it was Tuesday. And I thought, that's interesting, Teresa's home. I didn't really act on it, didn't think about it. And then a little bit later, I went about my business and eventually figured out that she wasn't home. And I walked into the dining room, and on the table was, again, another half of a muffin. And it was like a giant had just bitten the top off of it. And there's Chase, and it looks like he's got the biggest big league chew ever in his mouth. He can't even speak. He can't touch his lips together. There's so much muffin in his mouth. And there's crumbs everywhere. And so I stood idly by until he could communicate. Dude, what are you doing? Well, I ate it outside, he said. No, you didn't. You took a bite outside, and now there's crumbs from the front door to the dining room table. And then I just kind of lost it. And I was like, hey, dude, here's the deal. I'm just going to have to tell our friends, like, no more Costco muffins because our kids can't handle Costco muffins, and, like, they're too stupid to use plates and blah, 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 blah. And then I get to work, and I start studying Matthew 7, 1 through 5. And you go, yep, there it is. Like, I don't even know that I know how to parent without these brilliant tools in my belt, But what Jesus is saying here is, listen, the way of the kingdom does not use condemnation and blame. Now, is there a time where a correction is appropriate? Absolutely there is. Paul talks a lot about this. If you haven't read chapter 7 of The Divine Conspiracy, it's worth just buying the book just to read that chapter. And he does a very good job with when is correction appropriate. And let's just start with the observation that it starts with a posture of humility. Like, correction is never in the kingdom vein when it's done as though you're making a mistake that I'll never make. You're doing something that I've never done. That's the whole speck sawdust thing. It's about humility. Tony Campolo, one of my favorite thinkers, he says it this way, that if ever you're making correction with a smile on your face, not a tear in your eye, then your posture's all wrong. Makes a ton of sense to me. So yes, there's a place where correction is needed and appropriate. But Peter's going, Jesus is going like, no, don't condemn, don't blame. And then he continues, and he doesn't just stop there, and he says, because the other way you can control people is by giving them your wonderful solutions to their problems. Go to Matthew 7:6. He says, do not give to dogs what is sacred, do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Now, this text has been handled in myriad ways, and I'll just submit one to your thinking on it. I don't think this is dealing with some people who are unworthy of the gospel. Some would say that those are the pigs, or the people that, some use a very Jewish interpretation of this. I think that's all twisted. Some would even say that you shouldn't be giving blessing to somebody who's going to turn around and waste it. And I go, well, I'm host because I waste God's blessing all the time. So I don't think that's it. The issue here is usefulness. Like a pig can derive no sustenance from a pearl. And so if you're charged with feeding pigs, well, and you're feeding them pearls, what are they eventually going to do? Because they're pigs, they're swine, they're nasty, they're gross, they don't even sweat. I love pork. What are they eventually going to do? They're going to eat you because you're not giving them anything that they can eat. A dog, can a dog make use of a crucifix or a rosary or a Christian tattoo? No. See, the issue here is usefulness. Jesus is saying, hey, don't offer your wonderful solutions to people's problems before you've listened. I'm exhibit A on that one. Don't offer your wonderful solutions. You know the gig, right? They're only a half a sentence in. You already know the solution to the problem. This is about unsolicited advice. That's good advice, but unsolicited. It's about a posture that says, I'm not going to control you with my advice. I recently had a phone conversation with one of the staff members, and I made her cry. And I'm not proud of that, and I know you're not surprised by that. But I went into the conversation. It was a phone conversation. I knew it was going to be a somewhat tense conversation, and I'm proud of the staff because we've learned to go well, that's a part of good leadership. And so we had this conversation, and it was tense, and I expected it to be tense. I was a little thrown off by when the end of it was clear that she was emotional. And so when I hung up, what I told myself in my head was, well, we just failed to communicate because I kept repeating myself, and she didn't do some active listening to let me know that she was heard. And so when we had a chance to follow up later, I just said to her, hey, I'm really sorry about that. Sincerely, it's not my job to make anyone miserable. But if you'd have done some active listening, then I probably wouldn't have said the same idea 3,000 times, and you wouldn't have been so frustrated. That was my thinking, and again, until I really got inside of Matthew 7, and I realized that that's kind of the issue. The bigger issue was, I wasn't okay with her potentially not liking my idea. That was really the issue. You ever do that? No, I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. Let me say it again. No, I don't think you're going to do it, so let me say it again. No, I think you might be stupid, so let me say it again. No, I'm still not convinced that you're going to go run with my idea. Let me say it again. No, seriously, this is a good idea. Do you ever do that? Are you ever on the receiving end of that? And what do you want to do? Eat them, right? That's what Jesus is saying. You don't like them at that point. And that's the tension here, is Jesus is saying, when you do this, when you blame, when you condemn, when you offer your wonderful solutions to their problems, eventually they only have one recourse, and that is what? To attack you back. Venom is almost always multi-directional. It is very difficult to be on the receiving end of venom and not eventually reciprocate, isn't it? It's very difficult. That's why Jesus talks so much about the love for enemies and how brilliant and profound it is when we treat people that are incongruent with the way we've been treated, because it defies everything in the human experience. Venom, it always bounces off and returns to sender. With condemnation, or when someone is forcing their ideas upon you, eventually the only option you have is to attack back. So my friend Fred says, nobody gets divorced before they kill their spouse. Now, he doesn't mean literally, but what he means is very infrequently is there a divorce that happens before each spouse has completely invalidated and killed the other. It's just you have to. It's not best, but it's the natural inclination. And what Jesus is saying here is, listen, there's a better way. Let's go back to verse 7. Go ahead, Mark. Next one. Sorry, I said back and confused you. Yeah, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father, will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? See, Jesus is saying that there's a better way. It's called ask. Just make requests. Don't manipulate. Don't condemn. See, judging it's really about controlling people by your rejection, isn't it? It's not about correction. It's about, I'm going to reject you and hope that the negative feelings associated with which will alter your behavior. And Jesus is going, no, I'm a big fan of just asking. And ultimately, what do we want? We want to be helpful, right? Isn't that what gets us in these situations? Like, as parents, we want our kids to not have messes on the table. As leaders, we want people to make better decisions. Like, we want to be helpful. We want to be a resource. And Jesus says, here's how you can be a resource. Just learn to ask. Now, did you notice that the tone of the passage, it's kind of weird, and you can see why some would separate the judge part from this, because it shifts very quickly from asking something of people to asking something of God. You notice that? Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if a fish? And then all of a sudden, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Well, why is that? Could it be that you only have one relational posture? Like, this is one of Jesus' most central ideas, right? Like, don't tell me you love God and then turn around and treat people like this. Like, no, like, you can't, like, what was Jesus' deal? Like, his creed, love the Lord your God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. What he's saying is you can't, it doesn't get divided any further than that. It doesn't get any simpler than that. He also talks about forgiveness and says, like, don't wax eloquent with me with your creeds or your theology or your Christianity, and talk about how much you understand the cross and grace and forgiveness, and then turn around and say that person's not worthy of yours. Like, it doesn't work. I think what Jesus is doing here is he's saying, listen, you only have one posture when it comes to your controlling tendencies. You only have one posture when it comes to your use of language. The person who's prone to control others with their condemnation and blame and wonderful solution to their ideas, what are they likely to do when they pray? Like, is it really likely that we can be manipulative and controlling in this relationship and not when we interact with God? See, Jesus is going like, I'm just going to invite you into a different strategy. Just ask. Because how does asking feel different than condemning? Well, isn't part of it there's a togetherness? A command quickly brings about hierarchy. And are there places in life where hierarchies are necessary? Of course there are. But there's no togetherness in a command, in a blame, in a condemnation, but there is in an ask. Why? Well, it's because, as Dallas Willard points out so brilliantly, an ask works through people's freedom. An ask, it respects people's freedom. An ask can be told no, and when it is told no, it doesn't freak out. But in a healthy relationship and in a healthy request, an ask is actually a lot more fruitful, isn't it? See, what's interesting to me here is the tension is not, it's wrong to want something from people or God. That's not what Jesus is saying at all. He's just saying don't go about it in manipulative ways. We teach our kids to say please and thank you because it's polite. Isn't it also a brilliant strategy for getting what they want? I was talking to a leader this week and was talking about the dynamics of two different organizations, so to speak, and one of them is being really pouty and whiny and complaining, and the other is being really accommodating and just making very honest, forthright requests and not dragging their feet or pouting when they don't get what they want. Which one do you suppose this leader is really motivated to give what they want? The ones who are in a really healthy fashion, just asking, just making requests. See, what if prayer is nothing more than than a relationship between two parties who love each other and have views of what's best and have conversation. See, I think the reason why it gets so muddy from the way we interact with people to the way we interact with God is because Jesus knows, God doesn't want you to control him. So just talk to him. Make requests. Don't be pouty about it. I think we live in a time when the anger towards God and the disappointment towards God and some of those emotional things, doubt towards God, I think those are all very appropriate emotions. And our generation in particular is really prone to leveraging that theology, and I think that's a healthy thing. But I can't help but notice that sometimes we leverage it in a really pouty way. Like sometimes it's grief-filled, like, Lord, I'm just so confused by this. And sometimes it's like the child who's been told no and can't handle it. I'm just mad at you. And inside the anger is not a sincere contemplation of walking away from God. It's a mechanism for getting him to finally acquiesce with our requests. Look at how the passage ends. He says, so in everything you do to others what you'd have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets. See, Jesus is saying that the kingdom of God interacts in such a way that you just treat one another and treat God the way you'd want to be treated. What if? What if Jesus has a completely different way for us to interact, to manage people, to parent, to be in relationship, and it's one that just is forthright enough to ask and resist the temptation to control. You can think of it this way. Aren't you glad I haven't used this thing? My hope was that there's like this sense of tension that just comes from seeing this thing because they're abusive and controlling and it's just not comfortable. It's the best image I had of what Jesus is saying here is he's going listen, just don't overpower. Be respectful. Be kind. Be kinder than, be one step kinder than you would typically be prone to be. Just ask. These things, you don't walk away feeling respected. You don't walk away feeling like another one. You feel like what you are at that point. You're cattle being prodded along. Now, is God big enough and powerful enough and mighty enough to do that with us? Absolutely he is, but if you're wrestling with God this morning and you're really not sure how you land with Jesus, please understand this, that what Jesus is saying in Matthew there, if nothing else, is he's reminding us that God always respects freedom. That the world that we live in would look dramatically different if God didn't place such high value on freedom. Now, does that raise incredible questions? Absolutely it does. But anytime we shake our fist at God and say, why, that the answer has to cross the bridge of somehow, in some way, God is a respecter of freedom. So who are we not to be? That's my question. If you're here this morning and you're not really sure what to do with Jesus, my hope for you is that somehow his insight into the human condition, that was over 2,000 years ago. Well, not quite. Call it 2,000 years. That somehow his insight into the human condition would give you confidence in who he is and what he's about. And here's my challenge to you. Don't take my word for who he is. Don't take your friends or your parents or the church you grew up in's words for who he was and what he was about. As you go, stop by Guest Central. They've got some Bibles. Take one and just flip to it till you find the red letters and just take it in yourself. Because we all have agendas and we all have opinions and we all have experiences that jade our experience. I just challenge you, just take in a couple of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and interact with Jesus and who he was. And see if that pushes you away or draws you closer still. If you do follow Jesus, I hope in a sense you're remarkably challenged, not shamed though, but another real sense just encouraged that if your desire is wholeness, you're at the right spot. At the feet of Jesus, you're at the right spot. He knows you and your struggles and your conditions, and that doesn't mean there won't be a time for outside help, but you're in good hands following him.
For more information on Narrate Church, visit www.narratechurch.org or download the mobile app, now available for iPhone and Android.